Okay, this is going to be chapter 26. This is going to be understanding DOT, which represents that's Department of Transportation, and MC numbers, which is motor carrier numbers, and freight dispatching. So what we're going to do is going to go over and explain the two different types of numbers. You would think that because they're all under, because it's the two numbers, when you're looking at commercial equipment, it usually has MC number on top, which would be the motor carrier number, and then under it, it'll have the Department of Transportation number. The biggest one that you normally are going to see that people are referencing to is going to be the MC number. Now, if you go under Safer Web, which is it's actually the FMCSA, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, if you go under there, you can actually put either the MC number or the DOT number or the actual name of the carrier. But remember, if you put the name of the carrier, because every Secretary of State for each state, you can actually say for me, for example, I'm Truck Driver Nation, right? So if you went under Truck Driver Nation, for example, if I was using an MC, then it would probably have every state on there, which it should actually have every state under there that that particular company is listed under. So when you're doing this, make sure that if you're going to just use the name, that you know which state, actually city and state that they're out of to streamline it, line it, because they might have multiple locations. It might be the right company, but it might be multiple locations. So keep that in mind. Okay, introduction. Now, when it comes to DOT in the freight dispatching industry, the DOT, Department of Transportation, and MC, motor carrier numbers, are vital components that ensure safety, compliance, and operational integrity. This chapter the the veils. Well, that's a nice word. I didn't even know that one. And into the definition, functions, and implications of these identifiers, illustrating their significance for dispatchers, carriers, and brokers. We will explore how these numbers operate within the logistics community, the importance of verification, and the documentation requirements they entail. By understanding DOT and MC numbers, freight dispatchers can enhance their credibility, streamline operations, and mitigate risk. Okay, that's a mouthful, right? Let's shorten it up to reality. What we're doing is we're taking the MC number for everybody, right? Brokers have MCs, freight forwarders have MCs, trucking companies have MCs. So there's a lot of different types of MCs. I think 16 different types of MCs that are out there. And the main thing that people, one, you're doing two things. One, you're establishing the validity of that company. Okay, this protects us from double brokering, for example. Also, you're running their credit. Since we're based in an economy that's based on credit, this tells us if they're credit worthy. For example, are we going to get paid as a actual, because remember, we're the dispatchers, but for that carrier, we represent them as a carrier because you're in that position because you have the limited power of attorney, or are you going to get paid by that particular broker, which has an MC, to ensure that they're going to clear their debt, even when they're paid by the shipper. But the biggest factor behind that is normally as a dispatcher or a carrier that you represent, they're normally going to send those bills through factoring, and factoring is going to look at the overall credibility, again, credit worthiness of that particular brokerage to see if they're credit worthy enough that they're willing to take the risk to go ahead and buy the bills from you, go ahead and pay you up front while they wait the 30 or 45 days or whatever it takes for them to get paid, for the shipper to pay the broker, and then the broker to pay basically pay you, which have been the carrier, right? So there's a time frame in there that you get to, or the carrier gets to totally bypass because they're paying a small percentage to that given factoring company. So that's the reason these DOT numbers come in, MMC numbers come in so significantly to play when it comes to us. Now the MC number, I mean not the MC number, but the DOT number. Okay, Department of Transportation, you go through their scale houses all the time, right? What are they looking at when they look at us? They're looking at safety. That's the biggest thing. They're looking at compliance, and they're also looking at verification to make sure that truck is actually legally supposed to be on the road. So when they run through those computerized systems that we have, when they run the weight, the length, and everything, not only are they doing that, from my understanding, because remember, I'm just like you. I'm a trucker. They don't never let us see what's going on in the DOT because it's like the police. The police will pull you over and they won't never tell you what's really going on. So the whole deal is Even the CSA, when it comes to being a driver that's driving that given truck, I'm not sure, but I believe in the way that it's starting to work that they can actually identify the overall driver that's on their trucks. I can't verify that or not, but if it's so, then they can determine how much of a risk factor even that driver is based on their CSA score, right? Or even maybe even their PSP. Because remember, if you get a violation, that's going to be a PSP violation that is not only affects that equipment at that given point, but it also backtracks on that MC to that given carrier. So if they get equipment shutdown or equipment failure, then it's going to reflect back onto that carrier, and that in the exchange, the broker is going to look at it when he's looking at the carrier MC as well to see what kind of violations that overall carrier has, and are they actually worthy enough to trust to move their shipper's freight from point A to point B. If you can kind of see the spider web that starts to form in this, you can see how one touches the other so easily. But anyways, let's move forward. All right, starting with the chapter content, this is going to be what are DOT and what are MC numbers. A DOT number, this number is a unique identifier assigned by the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. We all know it as the FMCSA, to commercial vehicles engaged in interstate commerce. This number is critical for tracking a company's safety record and compliance with federal regulations. The purpose, the primary function of the DOT number is to monitor safety performance and adherence to regulations governing the operation of commercial vehicles. So this is the number that they use when you're actually pulling somebody's overall, whether you're looking at the carrier or a driver, and because one reflects the other. When you're looking at these PSP and all the violations they may or may not have had or even occurred for themselves, once it happens, that's the reason it's important for the drivers themselves to make sure that the carrier they're going with is adhering to the regulations. And this actually can be affected not directly, how would you put it, not directly on their part, but maybe if they are not financially stable enough, stable enough to function within the logistics community, because we're talking about big dollars, you know. Even if you've got a truck that's $300,000, that doesn't mean nothing if you still can't even get it to the dealership and it's under warranty. It's still a truck in violation, right? Whatever the factor might be. And they can shut your equipment down there and out of service. We're talking about anything that's out of service, whether it's maintenance based, like defect, or it's something to do with the HOS, the hours of service versus the ELD. Then these are all going to still be reflected on the PSP. So when brokers are looking at carriers as far as wanting to utilize their services, then they look at that because they're like, well, if you're getting out of service or you're getting equipment failures, then this is going to affect your ability to service my customer that we're trusting you with. But it can cause a lot of problems for drivers when they go from one carrier to the next, because if they had a carrier that you can literally, if you know how to look at a PSP, you can see what is really PTI, pre-trip inspection, that it could have been covered under that, or what should have been something that was handled by the carrier that could have been something that was focused more on the annual inspection. Um, it just depends on the scenario. But if you see a lot of that on the driver and they're still working for the same carrier and it's the same issues time after time, you got a question in your mind. Is that driver that negligent, or is that company just didn't have the money to service their equipment? So at that point, you still got to make a call on that. But are you willing to put your MC if you're the carrier, or even if you're the dispatcher for another carrier, if you're dealing with that driver, if they're going to go on their MC, the carrier's MC, are you willing to risk that carrier's MC to have it damaged, especially if they're owner operator and they've already got their MC and you're seeing that type of performance on their PSP? So you have to make a decision, because remember, your overall aspect as far as being the dispatcher is to make sure that freight gets from that broker to that receiver. But this is what DOT is mainly focused on. They're looking at the safety and the compliance of the equipment and the driver as far as their overall safety ability to make sure they're getting the proper amount of sleep and things to that effect. So now, just like I said, there's a bunch of different authorities. This is based on the MC number. So the MC number is going to be the motor carrier, but it's also issued by the FMCSA, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. So remember, these are all federal. So they're all controlled under the federal aspects of this. So this designates the motor carrier's authorization to transport passengers or freight for hire in interstate commerce. Okay, because these are all people that are commercially making their money, whatever, however they're generating their, as I say, their cargo, because whether it's humans or whatever it might be, it's all still cargo. But this number is essential for the legal operations and allows brokers to verify legitimacy and operational authorities of carriers. And you need to look these up, either which way it's going. One, look and see how creditworthy they are, but also look and just see, one, you need to make sure they're legitimate. You need to make sure they actually exist, that somebody just didn't pull somebody else's MC. And sometimes you have to ask the questions in order to clarify who they are. But the overall operational authority of the carriers, if they don't have an MC and it's not valid, then and if you gave them loads, then you're actually, one, you could lose your load because they're going to shut that truck down somewhere, and you or the dispatcher don't just take it for granted. Make sure everything is in place, and there's a certain profile that you have to match to make sure that these MC numbers for these carriers, their authority, that they're actually a function authority, and you can check them out. You can look at things like on SaferWeb. You can pull up their MC number as well under the, you select MC and you pull it up, and it'll tell you all the safety factors, how many shutdowns they've had, how many accidents they've had. You can even look to see how many fatalities, how many people have got killed under that particular carrier's MC. So these are things that everybody looks at when they're still wanting to do business with you. Okay, so how do the DOT and MC numbers function? Now, within logistics community, the carriers with both the DOT and MC numbers are mandatory for the carriers to operate legally. They serve as indicators of the trustworthiness to the shippers and the brokers. Now, the brokers rely on these numbers to vet the carriers, ensuring they comply with the safety standards and regulations. And on the dispatcher side, this verifies the DOT and the MC numbers, which is critical to maintaining the integrity of the shipping process and safeguarding clients against liability. That's making sure that, one, they're credit worthy, and that they're just not somebody that's flying by night, because you got to make sure they got their COI, which is certification of insurance, and that within that insurance that their policy regulates. Is it $500,000? Is it $1 million that they're needing for that particular type of freight? Because high value freight, it actually could be over that, and it actually will be a specialized insurance policy that they may have to bring it up even more than that. So each one of these instances, whether it's with the carrier, the broker, or the dispatcher, everybody has to look at the MC and DOT and to see the reflection of what is actually showing in that particular section of that given scenario, to make sure that they're it's feasible enough to be doing business with them. Okay, and the documentation when it comes to the MC and the DOT number. Okay, both the numbers must be indicated or included on the critical documentation that's going to be obviously held accountable for in the industry, or you could actually be, there's a lot of things that actually could happen to you. So, but the things that all this numbers are going to have to be on to make sure that all documentation is legal, that's going to be the broker carrier agreement. That's going to be your carrier packets, right? Your rate confirmation sheets, whether it's your rate or your load confirmation, and then your insurance certificate. So when you send them that information, they got to be on your COIs. So that's your certification of insurance. So if they're not on there, then that paperwork, it's going to end up causing you problems. So you need to make sure that those spots are filled in with the correct DOT and MC numbers. So make sure you review it and make sure those numbers are the correct numbers. If you miss a number, that means it's not on there. That's something else. If somebody wanted to be dirty about it, they could actually cause you issues. Okay, this is going to be the same thing. This is the difference between DOT and MC. Like I said before, the purpose and application. DOT number focus on the safety and regulatory compliance for all commercial vehicles. This MC number specifically grants authority to operate as a for-hire carrier in interstate commerce. So we covered it before in the previous section of this chapter. Ain't no sense of me going into detail on that one. This is a little bit of clarification on the requirements. So for the DOT number, this is required on all commercial vehicles over 10,000 pounds. Actually, I believe it's 10,001 pounds, or those transporting hazardous materials. For the MC number, it's required only for the for-hire carriers engaged in interstate transportation. Now, this is what you need to know. The word interstate transportation. It's also, as far as I know, it's also considered, it needs to be on intrastate. That's where the trucks actually do not leave the state, whatever they're at. So, but anyways, these are the two factors that make the difference on of when you need them and when you don't need them. So if it's under 10,000 pounds, then you don't need this, okay? So don't be wasting money, which they should stop you from if you go to the Department of Transportation and register your vehicle. In theory, they should stop you because they're following the regulations. So, but just keep in mind, there's always some way an accident can happen. But now this is going to be 10,000 pounds in all as far as the freight. Okay, this is pounds when you're saying 10,000. We're talking about of cargo, not 10,000 pounds what the vehicle weighs. All right. Now, this is the importance of DOT and MC numbers. It's not that this really makes a big difference in the overall functionability inside logistics, but it covers the regulatory compliance, the credibility and trust, and the risk management. Regulatory is just going to be by the book. That's the laws that we have, obviously, for the United States and DOT. But for credibility and trust, you're talking about moving a lot of freight, right? I don't want to trust somebody that doesn't have their paperwork in order. So when you're looking at the brokers and the shippers, depending on these numbers, they use them to confirm that they are engaging with legitimate and safe business. As far as you don't want to have $1 million in tires and hit a busload of kids and kill everybody in them, because they're not just going to sue the company. When people are upset, they will sue everybody involved. They'll sue the carrier, they'll sue the broker, they'll literally try to sue the manufacturer of the tires. They will go after anybody and everybody, even including the drivers, because that's the way the United States is. Everybody wants to get paid. They don't care how it is, especially when they're in a moment of grief, for example. Risk management, they aid in identifying and mitigating risk associated with transporting goods, which is vital for operational efficiency. Yeah, especially if it's going to be hazardous material, because you have to go under there's a whole hazmat for how to label, placard, and everything, not just the truck or the trailer itself, but also the contents inside the trailer. Because if it's been subdivided down to where it's not really a reportable quantity, it's still, these regulations help with making sure that they follow through, in addition to being over the 10,000 pounds. But this helps to make sure that everything inside that truck is documented, but also on the bills of lading and all that good stuff. And there's enough insurance to cover if there's, like, if you do what is it? I think it's chloride, one of those. As soon as that stuff hits the air, it'll kill anything around it. So that's one of the things. It ensures that everything's being packaged and documented correctly. So fire department, EMS, police, and all them, all emergency response people can identify the hazards that's associated with that given freight. All right, with the DOT, Department of Transportation, and the motor carrier numbers, you can obviously go, it's under the FMCSA, but it's actually called SaferWeb. It's a website that we use to identify different things, like what's the standing of their MC or their DOT number, to make sure it's in good standing. Also, like I said, it gives you all the variables to ensure what kind of carrier that they are, because it'll obviously list the breakdowns, equipment failures, wrecks, how many people they've killed if that's happened, and different things to that effect. So, if you want to know if they're legitimate, this is a great place. It only tells you about the MC or the DOT number. You still need to have secondary checks to make sure that those numbers belong to those particular carriers, because there's so much scamming going on inside it's in every community. I mean, but logistics, we're talking about a lot of money. So you could actually cause your overall, your carrier money. So if you got a load that's $5,000, for example, you just lost that money because somebody double brokered. So even though you can identify these factors and make sure that they're legitimate, always make sure you still do other precautionary steps to ensure that you're dealing with those people. Okay, you can actually, they've got their phone numbers, their address, and everything on them. And whoever you're talking with, like say if his name is Jed, you can call that phone number and say, hello, I'm dealing with somebody named Jed or whatever under that MC, and to make sure to identify that that's actually part of their staff. All right, this is going to be best practices for using DOT and MC numbers. For one, keep track of your records, keep all your records up to date, educate your teams, and use technology. When it keeps the company keeping your records up to date, DOT and especially Department of Transportation, you're going to wish you had kept them up to date, because when they come in and audit you, they are going to ask for every small detail, because that's where they find you, and they will find you tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars. And for you to have to backtrack those records after the fact of doing that particular shipment, it really becomes an uphill battle, because there's a lot of information that's going to be, you're going to have a hard time finding, okay? As far as educate your team, the best you can do is just do standard education. Everybody's not going to remember every particular detail, but have a run and checklist of like protocols or standard orders to some degree, that overall dispatchers and staff, is that they can understand not just why they need to follow it, but the implications of these numbers to enhance operational effectiveness. Using technologies, you got your TMSs, all the different platforms, because there's so many applications. Everybody's using different applications. But if there's some kind of standard technology that everybody's using, the information can get conveyed from one department to the next without too much resistance. So use it, it's integrated with these numbers, and it helps streamline the verification and the documentation process. All right, well, that's the end of this one. So at this was where I'm going to congratulate everybody. So you're halfway through the course at this given point. But if you have any questions or any concerns concerning any of these issues with DOT and MC numbers, this is just to outline just those specific factors, okay, of how those numbers are used, so you can understand the importance of how they're used inside what you're doing as a dispatcher. But all right, I appreciate it. I hope everybody learned something.